Welcome to the Eltropy Exchange podcast, where leaders of community financial institutions connect, learn, and stay ahead. In each episode, we sit down with industry executives, innovators, and experts for candid conversations about the challenges and opportunities shaping CFIs today. At Eltropy, we believe conversations matter. Let's dive in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Eltropy Exchange podcast. My name is Mike Pupil, Vice President here at Eltropy, and today I get the pleasure of introducing our newest guest, Royce. It is exciting to have you on. Thank you for carving out some time for us today. Before we jump into it, love to give you a more formal introduction, one that is very well deserved. And for those listening or watching this podcast, you will see Royce here, Royce Ngiam, who is the SVP and Chief Marketing Officer at First City Credit Union, holds over 25 years in banking and credit union experience, as well as an MBA in marketing from UC Riverside. Roy specializes in driving creative marketing strategies, data-driven insights, and impactful partnerships within the credit union industry. He's led innovative and measurable campaigns that engage members across multiple platforms and has actually emceed America's Credit Union's MBD conference. His expertise includes leveraging data to optimize media strategies, building sponsor group relationships, and developing sustainable marketing solutions in an evolving financial landscape, which I couldn't agree is more timely today. Passionate about advancing the credit union movement, he thrives on collaboration and innovation, and when he is not shaping marketing strategies, Royce is dreaming of motorcycles and black-faced sheep in Antrim Coast, Northern Ireland. We're going to get to that last part because that's really interesting, Royce.
We should probably start there.
If you want to, walk me through that last piece, because that is part of an introduction that I think is so unique. So tell us about Northern Ireland and the Antrim Coast.
Well, first off, thank you very much, Mike, for the opportunity to jump on the podcast here, the exchange with Eltropy. It's actually it's an honor, it's a pleasure. Thank you for that amazing intro. I think you'll have to just play that intro anytime I speak anywhere. Get that all bottled up and recorded here. That'll be my soundbite. Yeah, so years ago we did a cruise where we did Ireland, Scotland, a couple of islands around Britain, and we absolutely fell in love with the Scottish blackface sheep. They are one of the sheep breeds that goes into my favorite wool, which is Harris Tweed. And so the sheep themselves were just cultivated to live in the conditions of Scotland. They're hardy, they're smarter than average, they're super cute, and their wool is very, very useful. They're just adorable. Sheep are fantastic. I can't even eat sheep. It's too guilty. So our dream, have you been to the Antrim Coast in Northern Ireland?
I have never, but you are definitely making the case that I'm going to be Googling this and taking a look.
Remind me, I'll send you a link to some photos that I took. It is gorgeous. In fact, I think on my LinkedIn header, it's Ballantoy Harbor, the LinkedIn background image. And so that was just earlier this year. Every photo anywhere in Ireland looks like a postcard, and just amazing. Would love to have a bed and breakfast in Ireland and raise sheep, and you guys can all be my guest.
Well, I appreciate that. It certainly sounds a little bit better. Maybe I'll come instead of those Canadian winters. I'll be spending it up there with you guys.
Well, so Ireland, Scotland, it's actually on the same. Yeah. The same latitude there as Alaska, so I'm not sure you're getting any reprieve from the weather.
Swing and a miss. Well, Royce, thank you for joining today. Aside from travel details, I'm excited to have you on the podcast because you are officially our first Chief Marketing Officer, and you dive into some things that I've become wildly passionate about over the last couple of years. There's some projects that you've worked on, over the course of your career, and over 25 years of experience. You have definitely seen changes in technology, the change even in how marketing is functioned, what that means for the organization. And maybe we can start there, right? The evolution. You've worked at a couple of different credit unions, but also an organization, the Walt Disney Company, which is world renowned for their marketing side of things. So if we can take a step back, give a little insight to our listeners and viewers, take us through the journey that is Royce, that over the years, what have you done and what have you seen in the quarter century that you've been doing this?
Great question. So it started years ago. So When I was in college, I wanted to be in marketing because my marketing professor, I actually thought I was going to be an accountant. So all of my classes, my dirty little secret, don't tell anybody. But if any, my resume just says I have an MBA with emphasis in marketing. If anybody bothered to look at my transcript, they'd see I think I took one marketing class.
At all accounts.
Everything else, yeah, finance and accounting. And I really thought I was going to be an accountant, and finance was some of my favorite classes, and then even statistics. As a graduate student, as an undergraduate, I hated it. As a graduate student, finance was fantastic. And then cost-based accounting was really, even today as a marketing person, I think I rely more on cost-based accounting than anything I learned about marketing in college, except for an influence, and that was Professor Lewis when I was a sophomore in college. He kind of developed this desire to get into marketing, and the reason for that, I think, was my first time in my life at the time that he was a real practitioner. So think about the Orville Redenbacher brand, think about Gillette razors, think about Hunt's barbecue sauce. He led all of that consumer packaged product marketing, and that was really looking at the world from a consumer lens and a consumption and a purchase behavior lens versus anything through academia. And that really started kind of getting the juices flowing or starting me off in that direction. However, I learned very quickly on that when you graduate with a bachelor's degree in marketing, nobody gives you a job in marketing. You can't get a marketing job without any experience. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around that. And I happened to go to work for a bank at the time. So they ended up being it was a Washington Mutual Finance, so Washington Mutual Bank, fantastic bank back in the day. So now they all roll up into Jamie Dimon's umbrella. Now, I don't know how much of Washington Mutual is still around, but I think they were very progressive at the time, and then they ran into some issues on the secondary market, and if they had just done any homework. I think if you go back and study that as a case, because it had to do with the Dimeback acquisition, secondary market moves in rates that they couldn't properly hedge for, created a liquidity crunch, and suddenly Jamie Dimon is buying them out. Yeah. So, I mean, and to your point, I think I'm fortunate to be here. I think you said I'm their first chief marketing officer, but nothing we talked about in this last 3 minutes has anything to do with marketing. And that's really the dirty little secret, I think, is when you understand the business inside and out, marketing is just one aspect of it. Facetiously, guys, I'm an award-winning graphic designer. I have plenty of awards, and I'm self-taught in any sort of creative endeavor, including photography. You're not going to see anything creative opened. If I shared my desktop with you right now, Mike, you're not going to see Adobe, you're not going to see Lightroom, you're not going to see Photoshop. You're going to see me asking Copilot, how do I build views in Snowflake? We're working on data automation. We're looking at really getting deeper insights into the membership base. And that is with me being coming from a creative lens. And that is the way I do like to express, but that's not the foundation of what we do here or any place we've been. And when we think about, going back to the Walt Disney Company there for a minute, fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with them. And really the creative aspect that people see or the final product or the advertising, that's really the easiest part of the job. By the time people think about advertising or marketing, they think about that final product. What they don't realize at the time is that piece might have only taken us hours or weeks, but the entire process would have started years in advance.
Collecting the data.
Yeah, either collecting the data, building the story, doing the research, all of it. Even think of your favorite film. Think about a Pixar film. If you go that route, building the actual show is one thing, but the research into each frame, the research that goes into each scene, that's how they manage to capture so much authenticity. But people want to talk about the graphics or the software or whatever, and they don't really even care. That's just a tool. Anything we have are just tools. The creativity really starts with the people and that authentic storytelling. And then for us, it comes back to audience. So I use the word audience. I mean, credit union people, you might say member. To me, I don't care, because the reality is everybody's consuming content. And so how are we serving up content that people want to consume in the channels they want to consume? And that is really what I spend my time thinking about besides membership growth. And so as you bring that all together, the fun advertising stuff, or what we think about as traditional advertising or marketing, very, very small and quite honestly minor component of what we do. Once you understand everything else through the value chain, going back to cost-based accounting, once you understand every value driver and every cost driver, the rest of it's easy.
So I'm going to start with the first piece. Shout out to all teachers or leaders out there for inspiring a new direction for everybody, because it had certainly a significant impact on you, which I think now you're trying to,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Same thing on my side. I think this is where the interesting question always comes up, because I think we fall into what we passionately love by accident, not by design since we were children, mostly because we don't know what's happening. The second piece to this is that you take a very interesting approach, almost like a scientific approach to creativity, which kind of seems counterintuitive to this, because what you're ultimately saying is the creative part is the easy part. The more important part is all of the work prior to the creativity to ensure that maybe the messaging aligns with what the market is looking at or what could be consumed by the audience in the most favorable way. And then you get creative about that piece. Is that what I'm taking away from what you're talking?
You're spot on. That's a great way to explain it. I mean, a real easy creative example is I would argue that music is one of the most creative forms of expression out there. And when you think about contemporary music, rappers, R&B, when you actually hear the artists talk about their songs, it's not just this creative endeavor. It's not, how we want to popularize it. All of their music is very technically strong. Words are chosen for a reason. Beats are chosen for a reason. Rhythm, notes. When you look at popular music, people don't look at the technical aspect of it. And that music, there is very much a technical process that goes into creating that art. And any art, whether it's, think about photography, anybody can pick up a camera, or forget the camera, just pick up your iPhone or your Android device. They've got better cameras than most of the most famous historical photos or landmark photos ever known. I mean, you've got more power and more pixels and more whatever resolution in your cell phone than any of the most famous photographs. But really, when you even dissect photos, there's a lot of technical aspect that goes into it. It doesn't replace creativity, but there's just certain fundamentals that you have to understand. And I would argue that the masters are the ones that have mastered and understand all of the technical strengths, and then they can figure out how to break the rules. So last night, for the world out there, I am a Florida Panthers fan. I have been since 1993, and I shared in the pre-interviews or meetings that I have a John Van Beesbrook signed jersey that tells you how long I've been a fan. But last night, there was this save that Bobrovsky made. And what's he do? He squares up, classic butterfly, dumps his stick, and just covers up on the puck and falls. So he is a technically strong goaltender. He can he can see the puck, he can read the attacks. But when it comes down to it, when you need to, you can just throw all of the technical out the way and you do what it takes to stop the puck. And that's what you do. But that doesn't mean you have to get so technically strong that you can break the rules. You can't just get out there and be willy-nilly. You have to understand how to do it and then how not to do it. And once you get to that place, then you're cooking with fire.
I love the metaphors, and especially one with hockey, Royce. I mean, you're talking to a Canadian, so it's deep into my blood. I would probably go for another team, but you are quickly making me a Panthers fan as well, just by the style of play. And so best of luck to both of those teams, because if I don't say that, I'll have one of two countries coming after me pretty hard if I if I don't cheer for both sides. I agree completely with you. And most people, that when you're listening to music, there's always an 8 count, a 16 count, and that's why sometimes you can overlap songs, even though the music is not the same, but the count is the same. So to your point, that mathematical equation or the fundamentals of it being overlapped is probably where you're going with that. And that's the first thing I thought of when you mentioned, the technical structure of what it is that you're doing and where that needs to be sound, and then the words come up afterwards. So that's how I'm looking at it. Now, if I'm tying this back into the credit union world, over the last 25 years, there have been a lot of tools that have been built. And you're right, a tool is a tool. In fact, that's one of the things. It's funny that you mention a camera. I might poke fun at some of the younger generations. A camera is just a device that only takes pictures, not phone calls. I'm going to get so much hate for that, but I did it anyway. Chose violence this morning, guys. But I always put a photo up there to say, like, a tool is a tool. Even if your camera is worth $10,000, if you put your finger in front of, the lens, that picture, regardless of how much the device costs, is not going to be a great photo. And so investing in technology has to, obviously have a little bit of a balance. And there's, that buzzword of digital transformation that is spread around in every organization, in every company, in every vertical across the planet.
Yeah.
It back to the financial services, and most specifically your experience with credit unions. Walk me through that, because there's a lot of tools that are out there, continue to be out there, and that also makes it, in my opinion, a little bit difficult, and maybe gives people fatigue for looking at the number of cameras that are out there, right? Just in the works. So talk to me about your experience there.
Yeah, so that's funny you say that, because I always think about, if people want to get good at something, they always look at the equipment. So I don't know if there's any golfers out there, but people say, I want to be a better golfer. I'm going to go out and buy $1,000 driver. But nobody says I'm going to go out and buy $1,000 worth of training or lessons, right? But they want the equipment fixed. And it's the same thing in our business. So we want to get better at marketing. Let's go buy marketing automation. I want to get better at photography. I'm going to go buy an expensive camera, or I need that new lens, or whatever it is. Hey, pro tip, guys, the camera manufacturers that come out with new features, that's to sell you more cameras, not to make you a better photographer. Same thing in the golf industry. That's the same thing in any of the products manufacturing industry. They're not trying to get you better at what they do. They're trying to sell more of their product. It's a simple equation, and we fall for it, and that's what makes our world go round. But when you think about our journey, I go back. I remember this quote by Johnny Shin back in 2012. He was the chairman of ASUS, and this is going to take you back to Windows 8. And he said the most downloaded app on Windows 8 was to put the start button back on. And that was because when they introduced Windows 8, they thought, we're going to go to a GUI interface, because if you do your math at the time, that's when the Apple starts taking over, and Apple doesn't have a start button. But what did every embedded PC IBM user want? You start with the start button. That's how you turn off your computer. You go to start and you turn it off. Counterintuitive. So what I talk about is, we all think about the learning curve. We think about the learning curve with new technology. We think about the learning curve with whatever it is. That's not the problem. So the problem is the forgetting curve. We can't let go of what we do. So how many times have you been in a role and we brag about, there is over 100 years of experience in this room right now. Yeah. And I would say you have over 100 years of bias to get over. And that's because we all think we know everything. And so we think experience is that great equalizer. And I don't know if we talked about it in one of our meetings or I was talking about it somewhere else, but hockey is not a statistics game. Think about whatever stat you want, because whatever stat you go with over the history of hockey, that's not relevant to who's on the ice. You play every second of every Stanley Cup game, and it doesn't matter if you're losing by 5 or if you're winning by 5. You play every second, because every game can be changed by every effort, every influence on that ice at any given time. That's why hockey is one of my favorite sports. And so with our business, when you think about technology, and going back to what Johnny Shin said, we're always trying to reinvent what we're already doing. And that's so when we talk about digital transformation, it's sort of a fallacious argument, because we're thinking about an argument about popular, and we all talk about it. We got to do it. So we believe it. If everybody believes we need to do it, it's so. Or the Chinese proverb, which I like a little better, is 3 men make a tiger. And basically, the story there is one guy comes in and tells the emperor, hey, there's a tiger in the market. And he goes, there's no way there's a tiger in the market. That's absurd. Another guy comes in and says, hey, there was a tiger in the market. He's like, you guys are crazy. There's no way that there is a tiger running loose in the market. And a third guy comes in and says, hey, there's a tiger in the market. And he says, well, if 3 men say there's a tiger in the market. What's the difference? Who cares? I don't know. Whether 3 is a 5 is a 1. But if enough people repeat a lie or repeat a belief, we all think it's true.
You're 100% right. And I think that's true of a lot of different things, and not to get political on this, but I think that's the source of maybe humanity and communication, right? It's the way we ingest communication or information. It's how we digest it into our minds. It's what it is that we believe or believe to be right or true. And that's why words are so important. That's why messaging is so important. That's also why understanding, the audience is so important in terms of what you're creating. Interesting way of looking at this. And am I getting this correct? As you're explaining this, I'm trying to, kind of compartmentalize it and then say it back to you if I'm getting the essence of this correct.
But no, you're absolutely right. Because I think it's letting go of those biases and really thinking about it. So when we digitally transform, most of this audience is probably too young. But when we moved over, when we first introduced online banking, all we did was take every offline process and then build it into the online process. And I think we joked about this. The first thing that happened is when emails first came out and became popular mainstream, it actually increased the consumption of paper because everybody printed out their emails. The whole point of email was not to have paper. It actually drove up paper demand. Now, we just repeat what we do. So when we think about digital transformation, branch transformation, all we're really thinking about is taking our current processes, our current, I can't think of the word, it's that weight around your neck or the things that hold you back. We're taking all of those things.
Yep.
Yeah, we're taking all the anchors and we're just recreating those anchors. We're recreating every technical roadblock in a digital age, as opposed to saying, what is the experience today? What is it that people actually want? And so I often joke that trying to join most financial institutions, applying for a loan or trying to join their organization, it's like filling out a DMV form, but online. When what they really want is to enroll in online banking like they enroll in TikTok. That's really what the users want. So does your new account opening or does your loan app, does it look like a TikTok sign up? Or does it look like a DMV form? Which one is, what's really digital transformation? Because one's not digital transformation, it's just digital chains or I thought I had something witty, but it didn't come out.
I'm totally, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, the latest pedestal that I'm on is kind of the argument to try to push back against payday lenders, to work with credit unions to engage technology that is more, attractive or engaging to the audience, so that, people aren't necessarily going to payday lenders where they're paying, 500, 600% of ARR, and really working with credit unions more for financial education, financial stability, maybe even the right products, for this. And the proof is in the pudding of what you say. If you provide the experience that the audience wants, despite the cost, people will engage with it. And so it has nothing to do with the rate itself, where intuitively or mathematically, that's what we would believe. But if the experience looks like the DMV form versus the TikTok experience, people are willing to pay 500, 600 times the amount just for the better experience. And so,
I
yeah.
love what you said, because we have the right solution and we're doing it for the right reasons. Going back to the audience, that's not how the audience wants to consume it. So if we were to serve up the content, the media, in the way that they wanted to consume it, we become relevant. And that's what we're fighting for. That's what all credit unions should be fighting for. Like it or not, we're a niche market. Less than 10% of deposits worldwide. Every time I look, that's a number. I don't know if it's changed. Go do it. Do yourself a favor and look it up yourself, and don't take somebody on a podcast word for it. But go, if you don't know where to find that number, then get educated. Learn the data, learn what's out there, and learn what's shaping our industry. So go out there and get it. But if we don't figure this out, we're not relevant. It doesn't matter if we're doing the right thing. It doesn't matter if we're doing it for the right reasons. And it doesn't matter if our products and services are best of breed or we've got the lowest fees on the planet. If we're not serving up our content in the way the consumers want to consume it or the audiences want to ingest it, it's going to be a miss. We are no longer relevant.
I can't wait to clip that. Royce, you have me completely sold on this. And would you, is this really where the credit union industry needs to adopt or listen to that? Is that where you see the role of marketing within credit unions really playing a role in growth, or is this a deeper, engagement for marketing to take place? Maybe I'll just take a half step back and ask a more open-ended question. Really, where do you see marketing leaders in credit union industry land really playing the most important part for growth? What could they do if you're speaking to all of them right now?
Learn the banking language. Understand when you're talking to a CFO, whether you believe in ROI or not. I personally don't. I think it's again, I shared with you that I have more finance and accounting classes than I do any marketing classes. So that all said, I'm anti-ROI, because at the end of the day, what's the right ROI? Go back to class. ROI, you build ROI to break even. Why break even means you and I get to come back to work tomorrow. That is an efficient business model. We're not going to do that. But now if we believe in ROI, we're going to say, what's your most profitable product? It's a mortgage. By far, it's a mortgage. So then let's go back to efficiency modeling. We would say then 100% of our budget needs to go into advertising mortgages, because why would I invest in something that's less profitable?
Yeah.
But nobody's going to do that either. So now if we're not going to be efficient and we're not going to work to break even, then what the hell are we doing? We're just going to arbitrarily pick ROIs? So that's why I think ROI is a bunch of garbage. But that all said, you have to have that conversation. You need to have that conversation with your CLO. You need to be able to have that same conversation with your CIO, your CTO. You've got to be as well versed as they are. You've got to understand. One of the things I do, I spin up yield curves for fun. I don't listen to the analyst, any of them, because unless it is pure insider trading, they have access to the same information that we have, and I can make the same mistakes and lose my own money just as well as they can. And I refuse to be beholden to somebody who thinks they're an expert when they've not actually made any money for themselves or anyone else.
Word expert, I think, is also thrown around quite a bit and maybe a little bit too cavalier. So I agree with you. If you have access to the data, why can't you come up with your own conclusion? Why not do the homework yourself to also understand the context of where the answer is coming from?
That's exactly it. And that's what needs to happen. It is. America's credit unions, CUNA before, they've done a fantastic job. I'm a huge fan. A little biased, as you mentioned. I was chair of the Marketing, Business Development, and PR Council. I've been fortunate enough to work with so many talented people all across the country. There is some crazy, amazing stuff happening out there, and they are making an impact. They are shaping this industry. The only thing I would say to those guys is keep doing it. Get louder, amplify your voices, and make sure everybody's listening and make sure everyone's hearing it. If you're not up there, then get up there. That's the beautiful thing about our industry. The reason I'm on this podcast, we're all willing to share. It doesn't matter if we're competing across the street, because we really probably aren't. If you look at the data, we stand together and we help. We help. Get out there. So do it, pay it forward, or learn. Everybody's willing to learn. There's just some crazy, amazing stuff out there. And if you follow the Diamond Awards, the advertising awards, there is some crazy, amazing stuff happening. It's not what we think about, It's again, it's that forgetting curve. Not everybody's stuck 20 years ago. There is very, very innovative stuff happening. And as we started this, we signed Snowflake. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at automation systems that are being used by Fortune 500 and entertainment companies. I can tell you, at some of the larger credit unions, they're bringing people in from some of the largest tech companies in the world. The stuff that's happening, it's not what we think. Not everybody.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's actually why the genesis of the podcast started up, was to kind of ply a megaphone, if you will, in our small way, because obviously this isn't a Joe Rogan podcast, but in a small way to be able to voice some of these great creative ideas and some of the leaders in our industry. And thank God for credit unions, and doubling down in this industry, I think, is not only the smart thing to do, but it's also the empathetic thing to do. It is finance with a heart, whereas a lot of other organizations is finance for the bottom line or the investors. And so it's a much, much nicer way to start the day than only out for yourself, where you're out for the many, which leads
well, before you move on, that's why I've got to, I appreciate you saying that. And that's the reason I'm here, Mike. And, the Eltropy organization has just given back so much to the credit union movement. Huge fan, Ashish. Just the work that you guys are doing and the fact that you're getting this out there in the manner. Full disclosure for everybody, we are like, I even hesitate to call us an Eltropy customer at this point because I think all we have, you can go check with. You can go check, but I think all we really have is the collection tech solution. And again, full disclosure, we're looking at everything. But when we were in a time of crisis and emergency, you guys, everybody said we're going to help. You guys actually came up and helped. And so you put your money where your heart is. And I absolutely appreciate that. And that's why I was very, very thrilled and feel privileged to be on this podcast today.
Well, thank you for calling that out, Royce. It really does make you feel proud when you work with an organization that is help people first, or people helping people, which is a very, very familiar slogan in the credit union industry, and one that I'm proud to be an Eltropian. You're right, it comes from the top down with Ashish Garg and the rest of the team, but I can tell you the commitment for the entire group has been there. And admittedly, some of you guys recognize my name. I've not been with Eltropy for very long. It's only been since January of that acquisition, but it feels good to wake up in the morning and get to work with people like yourself. Royce, I think your story is wildly interesting. And there's a part here that I think accelerates the message that I'm going to, which is member growth. So I've done a number of different webinars, speak at a couple of different conferences, and one thing that I'm trying to ring the bell, and a bell that was rung long before I got up on stage, which is acquiring new members, growing the seg or growing the market share, like you were talking about before, saying go do the research and see the numbers. Some numbers I'll throw out is average age of a member in a credit union in the US is 52, 53. According to America's credit unions, average age of an American, roughly about 38. I mean, that is a pretty big spread, and not in one that promotes longevity or growth in the industry. It actually shows the decline. With things like payday lenders, 20 years ago, there were roughly about 4,000 locations, maybe about 20,000 different credit unions, give or take. Today's demographics is almost a complete inverse. 23,000 payday lender locations, roughly about 4,500 credit unions. Just a complete 180 in terms of those numbers. And that's something, even though coming from the outside, our banking system is a little different, there's a very big soft spot towards credit unions, and the data does not look like it's pointing in the right way. And knowing that you are so strong on the data, talk to us a little bit about, how you serve your seg, how you've been able to grow that. Am I making comments here that is just crying wolf, so that way maybe we protect, not that people are sheep, but I wanted to make an analogy that was clever with the Antrim. So where I'm going with this, Royce, bail me out before I put my foot in my mouth.
So I think if we go back and we look at what America's credit unions and their economists tell us, industry's been growing on average 3 to 4% over the last few years. So we're seeing consolidation in the number of credit unions. I think there's like 4,300 now. If we do the math, it's like one closing a day, I think, is something ridiculous. So we're seeing consolidation in the industry, but we're not really seeing loss of membership. But the growth factors are very, very small. Again, just low single digits. I was at an organization and we did manage double-digit net growth over a period of time. And so when we think about numbers, you throw out a lot of numbers. I remember this, again, back from my time at the Walt Disney Company. They were geniuses. Even Bob Iger recently made a comment about them being a data company. Would you believe it if I told you they could measure the impact of Disneyland ticket sales based on a social media ad that ran in the suburbs of Detroit? And the answer is I met the guy that did that. And so they can measure everything. Do you think, Mike, for 1 minute that any of the executives are talking about the impact of a social media ad in the suburbs of Detroit for ticket sales at Disneyland? No.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah.
What I learned, one of my clearest lessons that came out of my time there, is there's only one real number that matters, and it's different for every line of business or every segment there. So obviously ticket sales for Disneyland, ratings for ABC or ESPN when we think about sports, studios, box office gross. And that's why look at the headlines, $130 million this weekend for whatever Marvel movie comes out or film. That's how they measure it. That's all they care about. And that's what consumes them, is that one number. And for credit unions, it is membership growth. You build your business around membership growth. Everything else follows. Now, again, I just told you I'm using Snowflake, so obviously we're in the analytics world and we have other tools that we use. Are we looking at subsegments? Are we looking at, product penetration? Are we looking at adoption and usage and email performance? Yeah, but is that how we build our business? Nope. No, that's how we refine our business. We build our business all around membership growth. And so how do we build membership growth? Well, you stop looking at all the tools. First, you start looking at yourself. When I first came here, when I thought about thinking about what was publicly available, the way that we started thinking about it here at First City, I thought we were a law enforcement credit union and that we were for first responders and for sheriff's department. In fact, we were founded by LA County Sheriff's deputies 88 odd years ago in 1937. I thought we were going to be a law enforcement. When I looked at the data, I discovered they're not our number one seg. Our number one seg is the LA County Department of Public Social Services, social workers. They have 25% more members here than we do at who I thought we were and frankly, we thought we were. When we look at the data, it tells a whole different story. And so when you start there, then you start building your business on who is our member, who do we serve, and what do they want? And that's how we get to building it. And most of our growth is not coming from digital transformation, marketing automation, amazing creative advertising. It's from shoe leather. It's from relationships, and it's by changing our organization. This is why I got into marketing. This was the definition of marketing I got in the MBA program, and it was changing your organization to meet the demands of the consumer. That's the essence of marketing, not selling them product or witty advertising or Super Bowl commercials. That's just the tip of the iceberg. True marketing is when you're changing the company, when we're making the alignment changes, when we're changing the product, when we're thinking about fundamental conversations. One of the conversations we had with our chief lending officer was instant approval rates. Is that a conversation marketing is having with lending when they're looking at guidelines, when they're looking at process? And we've almost doubled our instant approval rates since we started having those conversations, which led into loan growth. Those are the conversations that we're having here that's leading to marketing growth. Collaboration with, and again, I'm going on the record and saying this because I think it's an East Coast thing, but branches report to operations, which makes my head explode. On the West Coast, branches reports to some sort of retail officer or branch officer. But our CEO, I love him to death, but he does come from an East Coast background and also up north background. So branches report to operations. I'm never going to understand that. I don't think I'll ever accept that, but c'est la vie. But working with operations and branches to work on business development efforts. So those collaborations are what led to membership growth. And I can say, look at a huge plug for Callahan, one of my favorite data sources, the amazing group there. But if you look at our membership growth, I challenge everybody just go back and do it for fun. Over the last 5-6 years ago, we've been shrinking. And if we look at the time frame, we're shrinking to the 6 to 8% in some of those time frames. So over the last 5 years ago, we've been shrinking. We closed 24 net positive, and we're growing. I think our CFO is reporting a 2.25% net growth this year. So we've turned that tide. Not where I want to be or not where we're going to be, but you've got to build the foundations. And then as you change the organization, inertia, you've got to overcome inertia. Ships are hard to turn. And once you get the foundations built, then you can start having fun and then you can start winning.
That was the first book that came to mind, Turn the Ship Around, by the former admiral in the U.S. Navy. An amazing book for transformation. You know, Royce, if you had to give yourself advice from 2 or 3 years in the past, you know, what would you have started 2-3 years ago that you're starting today? And maybe, you know, for those credit unions that are listening, if you have not considered this is where to jump in.
Yeah, go bigger. I mean, my only advice is the advice that I learned when I was at Disney. And if the advice I give everybody and I give to my team is go bigger. Don't think about doing something. Think about whatever you're doing. Just go bigger than whatever you thought it was. So if you think you're doing a membership campaign with whatever, or if you think you're going to try to change marketing automation, or you think you're going to bring on a data source, or you're going to bring on CRM, whatever you think you're going to do, just go bigger. Just don't compromise. I have Billy in the internship. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Go bigger.
I love that you brought that up because we've obviously had conversations in the past, and you have an analogy or you draw a comparison very closely to motorsports and credit union leadership, which I think is a perfect, kind of talking point to this go bigger and kind of what it means. Talk to me about the mindset that you've mentioned to me before in the past, which you call win or crash. Unpack what that means in a business context and how you hold that. And then maybe
Yeah.
that's two dots that I'm going to draw the line between go bigger and that analogy that we've spoken about a couple of times.
Absolutely. So my favorite motorcycle racer is Marc Marquez. He's a young Spaniard. I forgot how old he is, but I think he won like 7 or 8 MotoGPs by the time he was 27. And during that run, he was asked. So if you're not a motorcycle or racing fan, the way it works is there's really 3 races that happens. There's sort of a qualifying, a sprint race. So in the qualifying race, you kind of take the lap as fast as you can. And whoever's fastest around the track, then they start at the top, and then whoever's fast, that's the order. And so if we start from the front, you typically have an advantage. So when it comes to the sprint races, there's not the full number of laps. So it's still a sprint, so you're still running hard, but now you've got to do more than one time around. And then when it comes to the full race, there's 20 odd laps or so. And so now you start thinking about things like conserving gas, conserving your tires, weather, and strategy starts to come into play. And so the proverbial, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Conserve your energy. I think that's the advice that everybody was given. And I think that's the worst advice everybody's been given, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's wrong. Sprint. Because Marc Marquez, he was asked, but he said, you run every lap like it's a qualifying lap. Why? Everybody else is thinking strategy, everything else I talked about. And he said, because then I only have 1 or 2 outcomes. I either win or I crash. There's nothing else in between. Marc Marquez sometime later also says, if you win MotoGP titles, nobody remembers the races you lose. Nobody cares. It's all about winning. And that's what it is with Marc. So Marc actually, he got injured in a race in Jerez. Surgeries, came back, couldn't win for a couple years, changed manufacturers. And his choice, not Honda's, they still have a great relationship. He was a Honda rider. And he said, you guys aren't getting what you paid for. I'm too expensive. I can't win. It's not worth it. And so they parted ways. And he went over to Ducati, and his first season on a satellite team. So he had last year's bike. He didn't have full factory support. He didn't have the full factory data, the full factory technicians. He didn't have the new technology. He had last year's bike. He started racing with his brother on that team, and he wins races. In fact, he finished 3rd in the standings. I think last year there were 6 of these Ducati #1 bikes. So he finished better than 4 of their bikes. And this year they gave him the better bike, and he's dominated every race. So this last weekend in Aragon, he took the pole, he won the sprint, and he ended up winning the full race. And so this is the mentality that it takes to win. And Marc is always thinking about testing himself. He's always thinking about winning. And the eye on the prize is winning, not everything else. And we become our own worst enemy. And I think I shared this story with you, one of my favorite stories, and I try to tell about this one all the time. I forget the track now. I could probably look it up. But the weekend before, during the race, he crashed his bike and lost points. On Friday, during practice and qualifying, he crashed his bike. On the sprint race, he crashed his bike into the corner. And here it is. On the main race, he's in 2nd place. There's enough races left that if he takes 2nd, he gets enough points. So if this is a marathon, not a sprint. The smart person takes 2nd, finishes it, and you worry about winning the marathon. Win the war, not the battle. Marc comes into this corner. He sees the #1 racer, the guy in 1st place, and he's there. Comes into the corner that he's crashed at twice this weekend already. What does Marc do? Does he play it safe, play it smart, and think about the marathon? No. Marc makes the move. He goes for it, ends up not crashing, ends up winning the race, ends up moving up in the standings. And when they ask him, what were you thinking? Again, everything we just talked about, what any rational person would have talked about. What are you thinking? And he said, I have to look myself in the mirror tonight in the hotel. And I needed to know, could I do it? He wasn't thinking about that race. He wasn't thinking about the championship. He wasn't thinking about a thing except, can he do it? And that's what matters, is can you do it? Again, going back to those limitations, there was a million reasons under the sun not to do it. And all of them were valid. Are you willing to put it on the line to see if you're good enough? Because that's the only thing that matters. Not what your boss tells you, not what anybody else tells you, not what the industry tells you, not what whatever is. Are you good enough?
Well, I wholeheartedly subscribe to that. Growing up as a kid, played a lot of sports. I was a pain in the behind, very difficult for everybody to picture, I'm sure. But playing a lot of sports, I remember my father telling me, you always cross the finish line sprinting. And so to that end, whether it's practice, game day, whatever, it's always about your maximum effort, and how you practice is how you play. And all the analogies that we've had with coaches. And then sometimes I feel like we only think about that in the sports analogy, but our day to day in the corporate world is very, very similar. We're constantly working. And in fact, TGIF, thank God it's Friday. We would turn it around and change the G to grind. The grind includes
The
Friday.
grind includes Friday.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm going to just jump in here for a minute because I
please,
love what you
please
said about
do.
the way you practice is the way you play. Because that's the other great fallacy that you've all been told. Practice makes perfect. That's probably
Oh,
one of the biggest lies ever. Practice makes
progress.
permanent.
Ooh, I like that.
Whatever you practice, you're going to keep doing. So if you practice wrong, you're going to do it wrong in the game situation or the stress situation. And take one step further. When do any of you practice at work? Do you practice podcasts? Do you practice being a vice president at Eltropy? Do you practice marketing? When are you actually practicing? You're going out there doing. And when are you actually learning? When you're in a classroom, nobody learns in a classroom. I'm sorry. You don't sit there, take notes, and suddenly you go do it. You can't learn to ride a motorcycle by watching YouTube. You just can't. You go out there and crash your bike. That's how you learn. So when are you actually practicing at work? When I first onboarded my media team here, I have a young filmmaker and a creative manager. They went out there and I told them the rules are forget everything about bank ads. Go out there and go have fun, and that means filming at the beach. That means if there's laser blasters and fire, go figure out how to do it. I don't care. I want visual effects. Go out there and play. And that's how you learn. You learn how to storytell. You learn how to use technology. You learn how to bring the stuff together.
So true.
And then
So
once we get serious, once
Yep.
once we've learned, now we're going to put all that to work. It's like that Mr. Miyagi teaching karate. You could go out there and try to figure it out, or you could get the technical. And that's what they're doing. They're going out exploring, finding a voice, playing around with content. And then now that we're ready for prime time, all of the skills that they learned. Same thing, what did I say earlier in the podcast about technology? Said I'm using Copilot to look up SQL queries for my Snowflake instance. That's training. I'm not going out there trying to use the product, or you're learning it, you're practicing it. So whatever you do, great photographers do it. They go out there, they change their settings, they experiment, they practice until they get that perfect shot. And then there's that element of life. But you're constantly training. I remember once my daughter, she was 8, 9 years old. She's a phenomenal technical soccer player. I remember coming downstairs one day. She's 8 or 9 years old. She's got a Premier League game on. And she's not saying anything. She's just watching TV. And I'm like, great, you're grouchy. It's Saturday morning. If it was me Saturday morning, I'm watching cartoons and eating cereal. And she's got this game on. And she comes up to me a few minutes later and she says, Dad, those guys on TV? I go, yeah. She goes, they play like me. I go, yeah, they stole your moves. That's right. Yeah. But then it dawned on me. I'm like, holy crap. She wasn't watching it like you and I watch hockey as fans. She was watching this Premier League like a scouting video. She was watching the technical plays. She was watching their moves. She was watching the way they engaged and touched the ball. She saw the game so differently. And that's what she was consuming. And I asked her what. She had strung together 5 or 6 moves. I mean, she's 8 years old. By this point, Mike, she could score with both feet. She scores off corner kicks. She scored with her head. I mean, it didn't matter. Every part of her body was dangerous. And she'd played injured. I mean, she'd played under extreme conditions. And I asked her, she had strung 5 or 6 skills together. I mean, it was like a Sports Center highlight. And I asked her, I said, wow, that was amazing. What were you thinking? I mean, just kind of walk me through that a little bit, because the ball was coming, you trapped it with your chest, you did this and that, and you got around it, and then you put the ball right on your streaking mid's feet.
Yep. And
she said, Dad, all I was thinking was this person's charging me, and Chloe was trying to get open. I'm like, holy crap. She was so well trained technically. Her body did all the work. She was trying to get the ball to her buddy.
almost instinctively because it's been practiced so many times before that now it
Right.
becomes second nature.
Which goes back to that training we talked about earlier. Once you get that technical, once you know it, you can break the rules. You can do whatever you want. You could be creative with the ball. You can be creative with the motorcycle. You can be creative with your advertising. Once you are so well mastered all the fundamentals, all the technical, then you can do whatever you want. But if you don't have that technical, if you don't have the fundamental, again, I didn't take my team and have them go out there making commercials for us because they would have failed. They would have gone out and copied. They would have gone out and did what they thought I wanted. And that's not what I wanted. What I want is I hired them for a reason. I want them to bring that reason to life under our brand. Oh, and by the way, they're developing our brand and they're developing our voice in the process. And they've got to go out there and be technically strong enough to do that. Then they can go out there and do whatever they want.
Oh, I love it. And I'm going to watch with a lot of passionate interest for First City Credit Union, Royce, you and the team. Maybe as parting comments, and I know we're coming up to time here, so I want to be respectful, but maybe any last parting comments, things that you're personally doing, either events. I know that we just got to meet each other at the Emerge conference about a month and a half ago, but anything else planned for the credit union or yourself over the next half of the year?
There's a lot coming up. So yeah, we've got a lot of we're coming up with our big Christmas in July toy drive, which I bring up here. We work with DPSS. There's this amazing program called the Toy Loan Program. And so they library, but instead of checking out books, they check out toys. Some of these kids have never had a brand new toy in their life. If they're responsible with these toys, they get to keep it. A couple of years ago, there was a fire in their main warehouse. They lost thousands of toys. Last year, we found out we did a toy drive. We helped raise 13,000 toys for the toy drive. This year, we're going to try to do that again. So we're shooting commercials. We're getting activations out there for it. And the reason I bring that up is from a business standpoint, Mike, from any ROI measure, there's zero. It's a complete cost for us. It's a cost on our advertising. It's a cost on our people even collecting toys. The people that come in to donate, we're not trying to sell them anything. We don't want them. We're focused on our segs. So we're working on getting the county employees. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do for one of our segs and one of their programs that we strongly, strongly believe in. So that becomes the differentiator. We can go out in the community. We choose to focus on our segs. We're not going to say no if they come in, but we're not building anything. We talked about building all of our organization is built around serving LA County employees. If somebody else wants to join, we're not exclusive. We're not going to say no. They fit our field of membership, but we're not spending any money talking to them or resources. But it's given back to the communities we serve, which is our seg communities. So that's what we're excited about. We're bringing on that automation. We're bringing on, I keep saying snowflakes, so maybe they're going to have to give me a referral fee. If anybody wants to explore that, tell them First City, Royce sent you. But thinking about how do we get smarter about what we do, and then how do we let the machines figure it out for us? Not that they replace it, because we have to set the initial rules and build it, and then we let the automation do the heavy lifting and do the work for us. The intelligence, the knowledge, that has to live with the people, but the work can live in the machines. And so then my parting thought, I'm just going to go back to Marc Marquez, because at one point, Danny Pedrosa was his teammate on Honda. And they were, so long story short, at that point, Marc was winning all the races. Danny literally had the same bike and he couldn't win. And he said, this bike is too damn hard to ride. And Marc is winning races with this bike. And so the spat got kind of public, and they said, why don't you do what's right and go with a different engine that's easier to ride, and then your team wins. Right? I mean, that's what we were all taught. That's the teamwork. And he said, well, this is the Marc quote. Let's see, maybe the other engine was a little easier to ride, but if you go slower, it's not worth it. And so the answer was, why am I going to cheat or handicap us? Just because you suck, it's not going to slow it down. The point is to win, not for me, but for Honda. This team's going to win. So the more races I win, Honda wins. So it doesn't matter if the rest of your team sucks. You got to keep pushing. We don't want to slow down to make it easier. We don't want to slow down for everybody else to catch up. You keep driving, and you keep pushing your organization forward. And that's how the organization wins. We're not compromising.
That's how the organization wins. Royce, I can't think of a better way to conclude on that point. We have spent just probably close to about an hour now, and it just felt like 10 minutes. I feel like I can
And I
continue
don't think
talking.
I answered any of your outline questions.
Yeah, I think we fell into our own zone
Yeah.
here to just chat, and it's been wildly interesting. Your perspective is phenomenal. I love the marketing aspect. And by the way, for those listening or watching, you don't only have to be in marketing to be able to market, what it is that you're doing. To Royce's definition, marketing is changing the organization. And so if something has just been done for 20 years because that's the way that it's been done, maybe that is a perfect place to start asking questions as to why and what could be different, because very rarely things that are done 20, 25 years ago are still at a competitive advantage today. Maybe there are some that are still tried, tested, and true, but when it comes to
I
technology,
don't think these things were here 20,
yeah,
25 years ago.
exactly. I don't know if it's true for a lot of things. Maybe one or two can convince me. In fact, we'll open it up to the comments. If I'm wrong, fire away at me and and lambaste me for being wrong. But Royce, the amount of analogies, I'm a big story guy. I love all of them. Thank you for the creativity, and thank you for carving out time to join us today. Royce, a big thank you to you and to First City Credit Union for all the work that they're doing in the community and the support that they do to the members.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure. Bye,
Amazing.
everybody. Cheers.
Join us next time on the Eltropy Podcast Exchange. Stay connected, stay empowered. This is the Eltropy Exchange. My name is Mike Pupil. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Eltropy Exchange podcast. For more insights and resources, visit us at eltropy.com. We'll see you next time.